Hi, this is Lauren Hines. Welcome back for another edition of Scrapbooking Basics. And today's topic is all about tips for titles. During this series, I have a lot of different tips for you on how to create titles for your scrapbook pages. And if you'd like an overview of how I scrapbook, make sure you check out this video that I'm going to link here, and it goes over my basic strategy for how I scrapbook and how I complete my album projects. But today I want to talk a little bit more about titles for your scrapbook pages. And as you probably know, we have so many different choices when it comes to titles for our pages. We can use alphabet letters, we can use die cuts, we can use stickers with word art, and the list goes on and on. But today I want to do something a little different and a little fun with you, and we are going to focus on stamping for our titles. So we're going to take all these different ways of making our titles and just put them on hold for now, because I'll be coming back and sharing some other tips and tricks on how to use these kind of supplies to create titles for your pages. But today, what I'd like to do is focus on kind of one of my favorite ways of creating titles, and that is using stamps. I've recently been doing a lot of stamping in the latest album I have been working on, and so I just want to share a few little tips with you today on how you can bring stamping into your scrapbook for titles. Now, what I'll be using today is the Creative Memories ABC stamps, and I do have a set of 2 of these stamps. And I ended up adding these to one of my favorite ways of storing my stamps, which is in a clear DVD case. And if you're interested in these cases, I'm going to be doing some more videos on how I have all of my stamps organized in a bit. But for now, you can also find this stamp case linked on my favorite things page, and I'll also leave that link for you in the description. I'm also going to be using some of the Creative Memories pens today and the Ranger Archival Ink Jet Black. These are rated as acid-free, permanent, and waterproof, which is why I have chosen them to use in my scrapbook albums. And if you're interested in this product, I will also leave a link for that as well. In addition, the Creative Memories stamp set comes with a stamp block. I'm also going to be using the Creative Memories stamp chamois to clean once I have used my stamps. And of course, you'll need some adhesive and some scissors. And then last but not least, I have a printable for you for this edition of Scrapbooking Basics. And this is my first release of title blocks for your scrapbooking pages. And this is, as I mentioned, this is a printable. All you have to do is go to my website, and if you're interested in this edition of Scrapbooking Basics, you can download this and print it, and then all you'll need to do is cut this apart, and you can also see exactly how I'll use this in my scrapbook. Now, if you are not interested in using these title blocks, that's entirely fine too. There's so many different ways you can use stamps for your scrapbook pages. But I just kind of wanted to share a few little tips on using these title blocks that I've created for you. Okay, so once you have your page, what you need to do is cut this at the 4-inch mark all the way down. Then you can cut this again at 6. So you have a 4x6 title block here. These then you'll have this side of the sheet left, and then you're going to want to cut this title square off. And then you're going to cut the words off so that you just have a string of the words. And then you can cut apart these 3 different title blocks. Okay, so it's pretty easy. When I set the printer settings for my printer, I did do 100%, but I do have a borderless 8.5 by 11 feature on my printer. So it may take you a few little goes at how to adjust it for the printer that you have if you'd like to use this template. Okay, so let's jump in and talk a little bit about stamping. Now, there are just so many different ways that we can add stamps to our albums, but today I want to focus on 2 tips I have for you for creating titles for your pages. And I'm going to use the title blocks to kind of demonstrate, and then I'll share how I've used those in the album that I have here. Okay, so let's jump in and get started with some basics about adding stamps to your scrapbook pages. So first of all, if you haven't ever used stamps before, as I mentioned, this is the Creative Memories stamp set. And the first thing you need to remember is that when you load your letters onto your stamp block, that you want to go from right to left, because when we flip our block over, then our word will be ready to go in the right orientation. So that sometimes you have to always remember to read backwards. And also the stamp block does have these etched white lines in here that help you line up your letters for the stamps. I'm sure many of you have stamped titles just like this, where you go ahead and load the entire word onto the stamp block, and then you ink it or use your markers to add ink, and then you stamp your title. So that's the first thing I want to do, is show you the technique of just going and using the entire word all at once and adding that to a title. Okay, so the first technique, what I want to do is use my brown dot tip pen and just go ahead and ink up my letters for the word Jackson. And I'm going to give that a good coverage from my pen and just kind of make sure it all looks really inked well. And then you just take your block, turn it over, and I'm going to stamp it right here on the title block from the handout that I was mentioning. And I'm going to put it right here on that top line. So just going to line that up, set it down, and then give a good press. And once you lift up, you can see that you have a good stamp for your title. Now, what I want to mention about loading all of your letters on to the stamp block at once is that you will get this spacing between your letters, and that's just kind of the look. Once you load your letters onto the stamp block, you can see that there's only so close you can get your letters together, right? That there's some rubber in between and you just can't squeeze those together anymore. But that's the look, and I do like the look. It's spaced out, it's very kind of neat and tidy looking. So what I would do for this title, this was going to go on my Jackson Hole, Wyoming page. So what I did is stamped the word Jackson, and then I would just write Hole next to it. So that's another technique that I like to use when I am creating titles, is also mixing up both stamping and printing, or stamping and writing, and kind of using 2 different fonts to go together to create my title. Okay, so that now is ready to have some journaling added to it, and I will share how I use that on my scrapbook page in just a minute. But I also want to share my second technique for stamping for titles. So you can see that when we use our titles with all together on a stamp block, that you get that very clean, separated type of title. And this is another example that I used with another title block where I just stamped January 25th, and that could be used on a page somewhere. Okay, so the second tip that I want to share with you is how to do kind of a tighter title, something like this one that says Celebrate, And what you'll notice here is that the letters actually are almost overlapping. Some of them are overlapping, and that the kerning or the spacing between the letters is very tight. And I really love this type of look for my pages as well. So it's just kind of a different technique on how to use stamps in your album. And I'm going to use this title block from my download. And I'm also going to use this blue dot tip pen. We're going to use each letter individually. And that's where we can control exactly kind of how tight or how those letters look when we stamp. So right here, what I'm going to add to this little title block is the word escape. So I'm just going to start first, letter by letter, adding that to my block, and then inking it with my blue pen. Okay, so now you can see how the tighter kerning on the letters gives a very different feel to the title than when we spaced out all the letters all at once on the block. So that's just a different technique that you can use when you're stamping, and it definitely gives a very different look. Okay, so as I mentioned, not only can you use pens to ink your stamps, but you can also use a stamp pad. And I do recommend that when you are using a stamp pad that it is a good quality pad. And as I mentioned, I do like the Ranger archival ink pads. There are other pads on the market that are also wonderful. The main thing that I recommend when choosing an ink pad is that you can see that you get a nice rich layer of color on your stamps when you go to ink it up. Okay, so now that I have a really nice rich layer of ink on my stamp, I'm going to go ahead and just stamp this right on yet another title block from my download. So I'm just going to line this right up on the top line and go ahead and stamp that down. And as you can see on this one, I actually did kind of miss a spot with this stamp. So I'm actually just going to take my black pen and just kind of fill in a little of that detail on the J. So that's another thing that you can do if you are stamping, and if you're comfortable enough to just kind of fill in where there's a little bit of a missing place of ink, you can do that as well. So of course, that's another technique, using a stamp pad with the entire word loaded on the block. And you can also use a stamp pad just again with individual letters. So I'm just going to use that right here. And now again, you can see how just using the letters individually, you can control how tight you would like the word to be spaced. And then you can add your own handwriting. And have some fun. What I love about all these different title blocks is that it gives you a lot of variation and placement ideas for putting both your stamps and your handwriting and your journaling. So now I'd like to share a few pages from my scrapbook that I've been working on, where I have been using stamps to integrate into my titles. And first, you can see right here, I just went ahead and stamped directly on the scrapbook page the title to the location where we were. And for this title, I did use the letter by letter technique to create the spacing. And here's another example of how I've added a title right here to the journal box, again, going with a very tight kerning on my letters. I also just wanted to stop here on this page to show how I again used one of the cut aparts from the title blocks, but I just used it with the little cut apart titles that are also given, and then added that to the square, did my own personal handwriting, and then added a sticker. So there's always a lot of ways that you can customize these little title blocks to add them onto your page. And so this is where I just wanted to add that title where we stamped escape, and I added in some handwriting and then added it to this 2-page spread. So here's where I added in the stamped Jackson Hole, Wyoming with my journaling, and then added in another title block over here where I added again another one of the title words that comes with the download, and then some journaling and added some stickers over here to kind of finish off the whole 2-page spread. So once again, thanks so much for joining me for this Scrapbooking Basics Tips for Stamped Titles episode. I'd love to hear your comments. Which do you prefer? Stamping letter by letter or stamping all at once? And are you going to give this a try and do some stamped titles in your scrapbook album? So say hello and give me your ideas in the comment section to this video. And until next time, I hope you take time to scrap some joy. Bye for now.